Hey everybody, Angelic here, stopping in to take a look at Somatic Yoga. I've had a lot of people asking what exactly is Somatic Yoga. And so I put together a presentation for those who are interested in what the entry point is and what makes this yoga stand out. So somatic yoga, its entry point is about nervous system health. It's trauma-centered, and it really utilizes Polyvagal Theory, or at least I do, to help people regulate their nervous system. So I love this image here that we use. You can see how information moves through these neurons in the body. There's this interweaving of communication that happens throughout every cell of our body. So what is somatic yoga? Some of the things we're going to be looking at is, what is Soma? What does Soma mean in somatic? What is yoga? What is trauma? What is the vagal nerve? And what is the Polyvagal Theory? And then how can this information be used to help address trauma and stress? So what is Soma? The Greek Soma means the body, just as psyche means the mind. So therefore, somatic psychotherapy is the study of the body and mind interface. So Soma is the living body. So when we look deeper into, it's the ability to sense oneself through sensations. It's our felt sense experience. And who developed Somatic Experiencing? So Peter Levine, he is the leading founder of Somatic Experiencing. And this is a collaboration of many different fields coming together in one. So multidisciplinary study of stress, physiology, biology, neuroscience, indigenous healing practices, biophysics. And this is 45 years of study kind of coming together in this school of thought called Somatic Experiencing. And what is yoga? Yoga is a discipline which includes breath control, meditation, and body postures. We're not sure, but it's said to have been practiced for 5,000 to 10,000 years. What is trauma? Peter Levine says trauma is not what happened to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. I find this a really powerful statement. When I started my own trauma treatment, to realize that the difference between one person and the next person having the same experiences but different results in the end, one person getting PTSD and the other person not, there's such a direct link to neglect after an event. When we don't have safety and support around us, when we don't have co-regulation, where there aren't people around us to help us cope and deal and regulate our nervous system after a traumatic event, this is what really deepens the risk for PTSD. And we're seeing in research now that adults with PTSD are more likely to have unresolved trauma from childhood, or CPTSD, which is complex PTSD. Some people refer to it as childhood PTSD. What are some of these symptoms of PTSD and CPTSD? So basically, let's look at this list and say, hey, is somatic yoga for me? Well, these are some of the points that we're looking to address in this practice. So the symptoms we may see is the reliving of situations in your mind, the constant ruminating of events. People tend to have this idea of flashbacks of being like when the car hit me in that car accident over and over, or when the bomb went off. PTSD is more linked to these sudden, drastic events, these one-time events that repeat. But CPTSD is the layered experience of many events of trauma over long periods of time. And I like to say, when we talk about this constant ruminating events or flashbacks, this also can be linked to that fight that you had with your friend, the fight you had with your family member that you play over and over and over again in your mind. Then we can see the hyperarousal, which leads to problems with sleep, irritability, anger, anxiety, and startle responses. That startle response is like when someone comes around the corner and you're like, oh my God. And it seems so dramatic. I am guilty of this. My son kind of thrives on walking into a room quietly up behind me, and I always feel like this monster, because my responses are kind of monstrous. When I look over my shoulder, I have this like, oh my God, I feel scared to the core of me. And it's just him. He's just standing behind me. The response is so much bigger than I would choose it to be. And that's where we can see the nervous system has this inherent defense system that's always on edge. And even in these moments, these small moments, we can have these big responses. And then we see hypoarousal. This one I see most people aren't as familiar with. We hear hyperarousal or hypervigilance, but this hypo feeling is a feeling of numbness, of being detached, of disassociating, feeling empty or hopeless. We tend to see more of the depressive components with the hyperarousal, not wanting to get out of bed, struggling to find motivation to fulfill any task, really feeling a loss of joy and quality of life. This is more of the shutdown state. So we have one where we ride high and we're kind of always on, and then we have this other where we're just shut down and we're just shut off. That's hypoarousal. And then emotional dysregulation. Well, we hear this word a lot now. For those of you who aren't familiar with this language, this is the extreme responses that can hijack your mind and your body. It's where an event can happen. You feel the heat grow in your body. You're shaking, you're trembling, you're angry. You feel like you're going to explode. Some people, they feel like they go blank. They black out. They become soon consumed with rage. This is emotional dysregulation. Ideally, we have a cap, right? Within that nervous system. Our nervous system is built by the people we are around. So a lot of times we can see, especially with CPTSD, if we didn't have parents who had a regulated nervous system, they didn't teach us how to regulate our nervous system. Meaning, when there's these extreme experiences, they weren't able to come in and help us calm down and relax and regulate inside of us. They may have added to the dysregulation. And when we were upset, they may have got angry and screamed and yelled. So they did the very opposite of coming in and soothing the nervous system. They just increased the dysregulation, the fear, the disconnection. So what happens is a good visual to use is like we don't have these caps, where we have these ebbs and flows that happen in life, and we realize like, yeah, this is bad, but me losing my mind isn't going to make it better. Well, when you have a dysregulated nervous system, there isn't a cap. We shoot to the top and there is no coming down. The nervous system gets stuck in this dysregulated state. It's as if, imagine your nerves are just firing on all cylinders. That's emotional dysregulation. Negative self-talk, always thinking worst case scenario, low self-esteem. We can see this with a lot of people with PTSD or CPTSD, just a lack of belief in ourselves, lack of will and determination. You just kind of have been beaten down and expect everything to be kind of shitty. The world is shitty. People are shitty. I can trust no one or nothing. And that's only part two, right? There are shitty people. There are shitty scenarios. There are shitty things that happen in life. But what happens when we get stuck in this mind frame, it's a defense system that says, I can trust no one. So part of that is a lie. There are people that we can trust. There are safe places in the world. Avoidance is a big symptom, whether it's of intimacy, connection, talking, sharing of experiences. This is a big one, right? And this is linked to this dysregulation. So if we're triggered by interpersonal relationship dynamics, this is a big one if you have CPTSD. If your inner defense system says people are not safe, touch is not safe, intimacy is not safe, we're going to begin to avoid the things that make us feel dysregulated. We're going to avoid the things that don't make us feel safe in our body. So once again, if our body is always saying no one is safe, we can't move into a place of connection and organic organic exchange of vulnerability. So that's how we see avoidance. There is, because of this dysregulation, we often see a sensitivity to light, a sensitivity to sound, to smell. Once again, there's no regulation that's happening. These things feel extreme to those of us that have disrupted nervous systems. So we'll tend to avoid situations that put us in that state. Then abuse of alcohol and drugs, which we can use to self-medicate, to numb, to disassociate from what's happening or the experiences that are happening. Because of these hypersensitivities, we can use drugs and alcohol to subdue those symptoms. And then, of course, worst case scenario is self-harm or suicidal thoughts. There is a deep hopelessness and helplessness that's associated with PTSD and CPTSD, where we can feel like our bodies and our minds are being hijacked and we have no control over our life and our reactions to the world. And we can kind of lose hope. And this is where that suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideations can come in. So what is the vagal nerve? I love this image. So here's the vagal nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve, and it's coming, it's connected here with the brainstem, and then it connects other structures of the body. So here are some branches off of that vagus, and these branches are going into the throat, into the heart, into organs, into the intestines. So here it says, including the neck, thorax, and abdomen, the vagal nerve functions mainly within the autonomic nervous system. So just think, this nerve we're talking about is connected to all these different points in the body. So when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, it's composed of two distinct divisions, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Right? They kind of run two different ways in the body. So the sympathetic system, which we hear a lot, the sympathetic state, because most of us are functioning in this state. When we're in the sympathetic state, the sympathetic nerves, they can dilate the pupils, inhibit salivation, they can relax the airways, they increase the heart rate, they inhibit activity of the stomach. This is a big one. We see a lot of chronic digestive issues in people who have trauma or extreme chronic stress. Literally, the sympathetic system inhibits the activity of the stomach and its ability to break down food, so it slows that down. It inhibits activities of the intestines. So once again, we have the stomach that's affected and the intestines are affected. So then what is the parasympathetic system doing? Well, it can constrict the pupils. It constricts the airways. It can slow the heart rate. It stimulates activity of the stomach, and it stimulates activity of the intestines. So here you can see why, if you're functioning in the sympathetic system, it's affecting other areas of the body in a negative way. It is slowing down these systems that we need to function well to maintain homeostasis and health in the body. So here, most of society, this is where we're functioning, and we wonder why we have these chronic health issues. A quote I heard was, "The real pandemic is trauma." This is why the healthcare system is bombarded with patients with these ghostly illnesses and complaints and diseases, and we never can get to the root of them. Well, when we're functioning here, it's just throwing out of balance the rest of the parts of the body. So this parasympathetic, which helps us move into this rest and digest state, this is where the vagal nerve functions through. This is what it's part of. So what is the polyvagal theory? So Dr. Stevens, he's a scientist and he runs a trauma research center. He published his research, which we call the polyvagal theory. He's kind of the leading father on uncovering the connection between the autonomic nervous system and trauma and anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. He's the author of the Pocket Guide to Polyvagal Theory. And that was his way of taking this scientific research and putting it in form where we could understand it better, where practitioners can use it like us in a more therapeutic form. And here's another great image of that vagus nerve, right? Look at this. Look at all the places it's going into the lungs and the heart, dropping down, the organs, the intestines. It's just got a piece to play throughout the whole body. So what are some of the insights that he found during that study? Well, he says we have 3 neurocircuits: dorsal vagal, sympathetic, and ventral vagal. And at all times, we're in one of these 3 states and they are doing something. What are they doing? They are evaluating our environment and reacting to cues of safety or threat. We call this neuroception. He calls this neuroception. It's how our autonomic nervous system subconsciously evaluates and responds to cues of danger or safety in our environment. So neuroception is saying there is a part of us that we are completely unaware of that's deciding in every moment, am I safe or am I in danger? And when we look at this hierarchy, when we're in a ventral state, right, these are 3 dominant neurocircuits. When we're in a ventral state, we feel secure and we can connect with the people around us. This is where intimacy and vulnerability can happen. We have to be in a place of safety. The nervous system has to be having a safety experience. The sympathetic system, which tends to be where we function in society currently, it mobilizes us for fight or flight. It can make us feel stressed and agitated. It increases the heart rate, it gets the blood flowing, and then it starts to shut down these other parts of the body that aren't survival parts, right? When we're in a state of needing to survive for our life, the nervous system goes, oh, well, we don't need to digest our food right now. We need to be able to run faster. So instead of putting energy in digestion, we're going to put energy into the heart and these other parts that allow us to run fast. And then we have dorsal, which is the shutdown state, feeling disconnected or numb. So going back to those symptoms we looked at with PTSD and CPTSD, we can begin to ask ourselves, where am I at in the hierarchy here? How is my vagal nerve functioning? So what does this practice allow us to do? What's the intention behind somatic yoga or somatic experiencing? We're looking to decrease the hypervigilance, which is that elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you. We're looking to decrease hyperarousal, which is when that body suddenly kicks into high alert. We're looking to decrease avoidant behaviors by avoiding places, people, and activities that result in isolation. Now we know because of studies with animals and with orphans, when animals and orphans are not touched, when they are allowed to experience connection and safety, literally their brain begins to reform. There are very particular areas of the brain that begin to shrink. And ultimately, with animals in isolation, they will die. So we see that touch and connection is necessary for harmony, co-regulation, being with other people, it absolutely is necessary to our nervous system. What happens when we have trauma is we are now wired for defense. We now begin to isolate because everyone else or everything else is unsafe according to our neuroception. And as a result, that isolation now begins to affect us in ways we can't always see. Like I said, linked to these studies that show us we digress. Our quality of life, our window of tolerance, it digresses when we are not connected to other people and other things. We also look to decrease muscle armoring, which is the continually tensed and bracing for the worst, right? So we know also through studies with people with trauma, the body is hard. When a muscle is tight, people kind of say this casually when they come in for body work with me, like, oh yeah, I know I got tight shoulders, or I got tight legs, or tight glutes. Listen, when your muscles are tight, that's requiring energy, first off. Secondly, that is armoring. You are tightening your body. It is a response to stress, to fear, to overwhelm. This armoring is very common in people who have trauma. This is literally the body always on guard and prepared. This is a clear example of how we can see trauma manifest in a physical way. Increase body awareness and decrease disassociation as a coping mechanism. We're looking to enhance the sense of safety, which allows us the capacity to connect, to return to a state of connection with other people. This practice allows us to strengthen the vagal tone. When we strengthen our vagal tone, it helps us increase emotional regulation. Once again, imagine the vagal tone like a muscle. Just like we can build muscles, we can increase the overall wellness and performance of muscles. We also can do this with vagal tone. And this has been studied. This is part of the Polyvagal Theory. This has been studied. Our vagal tone can show our disposition, our emotional disposition, our ability to handle different stimuli. We also look to increase our window of tolerance, increase the window of tolerance safely, slowly increasing our ability to be in discomfort. So that's another different entry point that Somatic Yoga offers. We're not pushing you fast and hard. There are many forms of yoga or physical practices that push us to the edge, and that is great for an ideal nervous system, but it's just not ideal for people who have had trauma. Too fast and too hard can be extremely dysregulating. I mean, let alone just coming to a class or being in a group setting, doing something that is different can already trigger the nervous system that it's not safe. And create a whole spiraling. So discomfort, pain, for people who already have a dysregulated nervous system, this can just increase the issue. So slowly increasing the window of tolerance, which is just applying a little discomfort and working with a little discomfort at the time. It's little breadcrumbs, and that's the thing with trauma. We just have to take little moments at a time. We have to take little attempts, little bites at it, and slowly rewire the nervous system's experience with things. So I have found, whether you have trauma or not, people tend to immediately have a reservation to be in a group setting and do weird things with their body. This is common feedback I've had for 11 years. Going in and bending and twisting, it just feels weird to me. I feel like it could be embarrassing, right? So there's a lot of things that can really tie into why people don't want to show up and try new things. And when we have trauma, that can just be increased. So a little bit about me, why practice with me? What brought me here? What is the background to this practice? Well, I came up working in a inpatient psychiatric hospital, and that was really fundamental. I saw people continuously return time and time again for years. I have seen the inside working of medication and talk therapy and the effects it has, positive and negative, for people in the long haul. I have touched thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies. I find this is such an intimate act, especially if you have trauma, to allow someone to assist you in co-regulating your body, which is what happens when you go get massage or body work. You're allowing someone else to participate in affecting your body and your nervous system. I have invested thousands of hours educating in yoga and meditation. I have been a Red Cross volunteer working at a concussion recovery center with active duty military service members. I trained in integrative somatic trauma therapy. I'm also a registered intimacy coach that focuses on safe, conscious touch for nervous system regulations, as well as helping sexual abuse victims process shame, guilt, and disconnection in the body. And more intimately, I've spent my whole life addressing my own CPTSD. So when people think that what I do is such a great service to society, it's also very selfish. Everything I have ever done is very selfish. It's been a practice of trying to address my own nervous system issues, my own traumas. I still, as we speak today, I have a therapist and I have an embodied practice. I don't know that I'll ever give those things up, because now I know these are part of having a tool belt for life. Life isn't always easy, but when you have people to support you, when you have practices to support you, the likeliness of you being taken by the tsunami, it grows smaller. And that's the hope through this somatic practice, somatic yoga in general. Yoga has been a powerful practice for me. All forms of yoga has been a powerful practice for me. But really the science, the studies of somatic work really helped me bring all the pieces together in a different way. And I've realized, like with yoga, there is a philosophy. There absolutely are many branches to yoga. There's many ways to enter the yogic realm. But somatically just makes a lot of sense for those of us with trauma. It's really combining all of this wisdom between somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, and then this just ancient study of yoga. Now, here are some of the resources and references of this information we just went in. If you really resonate with some of the things that I'm talking about, these are some of the books and some of my teachers, the people that I learned from to get this information. Manuela, she was one of my teachers. She has a great book, Somatic Psychotherapy Toolbook. It has active worksheets and practices. I really love it. It's a practical tool book, especially for practitioners, if you're looking for a way to integrate this into a therapy practice or a yoga practice. And then, of course, Peter Levine. He has many books. Awakening the Tiger, Healing Trauma. And then Gabor Mate, he's just rocking the world right now with his work. He's a voice for so many of us with trauma. So when the body says no, exploring the stress-disease connection. If you have chronic health issues, get his book. Really get his book. He brings a voice to our health issues and clarity in a way that's just, it's deeply moving. I love his work. Ariel Schwartz, she was one of my teachers in my program. The Complex PTSD workbook. Dr. Stevens, who we talked about before, he's the scientist with the Polyvagal Theory. If you have not read The Body Keeps Score, I cried reading this, but actually I got it on audiobook. I listened to it, and 3 days. It was so validating. But trigger warning, if you have trauma, if you have PTSD in particular, there's some really deep stuff that can be dysregulating to you. One of my coaches had to remind me, like, you have to put the book down when you feel yourself that getting dysregulated by what you're reading. I mean, just crying. And she was right. I was like, ooh, yes, I'm consuming all of this, but at the same time, it's like, oh my God, I'm having such an emotional response to these words that I'm reading. It's so close to home. And then, of course, Somatic Experiencing International. That's where I trained. So this is some just a few of the resources that I've used. So I hope this has helped bring some clarity to somatic yoga, the practice that I'm offering. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Wishing the best for all of you. Talk soon.